Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. While we probably are very familiar with risotto, we're probably very familiar with the riso bianco growing up. We're probably also very familiar with rice, stuffed tomatoes, or insalata di riso, which are staples of an Italian summer picnic. But there is so much more to the culture and the world of rice that I'm really delighted to have today Valentina Masotti, who is one of the first rice sommelier that will share her wealth of knowledge with us to understand more about the classifications of rice, the history of rice, how to prepare a great risotto, how to recognize also how to read the labels to choose the best risotto for your dish. But you gotta hang on tight because there is always a little pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Well, I'm very delighted to bring Valentina Masotti with us. Buonasera, Valentina.
Buonasera, Viviana. Hi.
So where are you connecting from?
I'm connecting from Italy, from Vercelli, that is probably the most famous town in Italy for the rice cultivation.
And indeed. So we grew up also studying about, the rice fields in Vercelli and the neighboring areas, the culture of the Le Mondine, the songs that have come out of rice cultivation. And so I'm sure today's conversation is going to be very interesting for our audience and myself as well. But obviously, the first question is, what is an Italian sommelier? How do you become a rice sommelier?
Well, I can say that I almost invented the rice sommelier with some friends, because in Italy we have different kinds of sommelier, like the wine sommelier for cheese, coffee, chocolate, olive oil, even for the water. But until 2015, there were not sommelier or specialists about sensory analysis of the rice. And so we created this new professional figure, this new professionist, analyzing the raw rice, the aspect, observing the rice, looking for the defects and the quality of the rice, smelling the rice to recognize the descriptors of the smell of the rice, and even tasting the quality, because to cook a good, perfect risotto, we also need the perfect rice. And so in 2015, Acqua Verde Riso was born, and it is the first and the only Italian and European society using sensory analysis applied to the rice.
So you became you and this organization are the pioneers in this field, in this particular profession.
Yes, yes. And the founders are Massimo Biloni and Davide Gramegna. Massimo Biloni is an expert in rice cultivation. He's also an agronomist, and he creates with the breeding techniques new rice varieties, while Davide Gramegna is an expert in sensory analysis. So we have different competencies to front this brand new argument in Italy and in Europe, especially about the main topic. I think is the rice for risotto, because it is the very typical dish, a symbol of Italian
Cuisine.
of Italia, in the world.
Wonderful. So let's dive in already into maybe the topic. Can you tell us a little bit, was rice indigenous of Italy, or was it brought in from other countries to Italy? And specifically, if that was the case, where were the areas?
Okay. Well, I have a presentation I can show you through a map where the rice is cultivated nowadays in Italy. And it came probably across the Sicily through the Arabs during the 9th century. And it was spread through Sicily, through Piedmont, coming from Spain and France, the south of France, and then arriving in the northwest of Italy. And maybe also through the Arabs, coming from Turkey and arriving in the northeast of Italy. But the cultivation of Italy is concentrated in the north because of the quantity of water and the irrigation infrastructures that were developed during the centuries. In the south of Italy, the weather, the climate is good for the rice cultivation, but there were not the right infrastructures to irrigate the rice fields. So we developed the rice cultivation, especially in the northwest of Italy. And that's why the 93% of the rice cultivation is concentrated between Piedmont and Lombardy. So almost the total surface of rice cultivation is concentrated in this area. Even if you have very good excellencies in the northeast, like in the Verona territory, where there is the Vialone Nano Veronese, it is a PGI rice, or even near Ferrara and Rovigo, where we have another PGI rice that is called Riso Delta del Po, cultivated under the level of the sea, a very peculiar taste, almost a salty taste, a very mineral rice appreciated in all of Europe. And we also have a lot of kind of rices cultivated, about 170 varieties cultivated, even if the consumer usually know just a few. I would like to say about 5 or 6 varieties of rice in Italy. So we have many things to learn about the rice, even in Italy.
Indeed. Was it always the case that we had so many varieties? I think you, in a previous conversation, you also mentioned about a variety that was grown by French monks and was used for medical purposes, right? That's pretty interesting. So.
Yes, because as I told you before, we introduced the cultivation of the rice in the Middle Age, and it was due through the Arabs. But there were some monks coming from France, Borgogna. They founded an abbey that is called Abbazia di Lucedio Abbey, that is very near Vercelli. And they introduced the rice cultivation, but it was just a medical use, so it was a very small land in which the rice was cultivated. There was not a tradition of rice like a cereal, a popular cereal. And even in Salerno, near Naples, Scuola Salernitana was another creation of monks that introduced the rice as a medical, like a medicine.
Yes.
Okay, it was like a medicine for the pains of the belly and some gastronomic disease.
Well, that actually explains why when growing up, if you do have a little tummy ache, what your mother would make is riso in bianco right off the bat. So when you have riso in bianco, it's just maybe a little bit of butter or cheese or riso. And I remember probably eating in broth as well. It was usually the fix for the tummy aches. Now we're closing the loop of these traditions. Now, is there any chance that we can talk a little bit about the rice classification? Not all rice are the same. So can you give us some information?
Well, the rice has different kind of types depending on a classification. Well, in the USA, there are 3 classes of rice, and I will show you a presentation, and I will try to explain the difference between the rices, considering the length and the shape of the grain. So, for example, in the United States, there are 3 classes, starting from the round grain, that is the smallest, going to the medium, that is a little bit longer, and arriving to the long grain. The long grain is the tall one. But in Europe and in Italy, we had a 4th class to divide the long A grain to long B grain. So the long A grain has an oval shape, so it is considered the best rice to prepare a risotto, while the long B grain has a thin shape, so it is long but slender, and it's used for salads and side dish. It's very similar to basmati, okay? That is probably the most famous of the long B rices. And we call this kind of rices indica because they are very similar to the rices coming from India, like basmati. But we don't use the long B rices for risotto. We just use them for salads, for side dishes, with the meat or fish or vegetables, but we boil this kind of rices, and then we use them like a side dish with other ingredients. While the long A rice is particularly appreciated for risotto, and we cook this rice in the broth, absorbing the liquid while we are cooking it. And so we rarely use it for boiled rice. And for example, we have other rices with the same shape but smaller, like the round grain, and we use these rices for soups or desserts, cream, because they cook in less time, and also because they don't have the same consistency of the long A grain. Because for risotto, we selected the long A grain to have to get a final risotto al dente with a good consistency, with a hard grain, while the round grain is quite soft, and we use it for soups, for example. We also use the round grain for sushi, because sushi in Italy is very
it's a huge boom in the last few years. Many elegant restaurants have this all-you-can-eat sushi, or so I would assume that now that might have also switched a little bit, shifted the focus of the industry to produce and export more of this type of rice as well, because not only we grow and we consume it, but Italy is a huge exporter of rice.
It's a very huge exporter, and 2 parts on 3 are exported of Italian rice. We just keep inside 1 part on 3 of rice. And we cultivate around the grains, not only for export, but also for internal use. Because we have many sushi bar, we love poke, and we use this kind of rices. We also have Italian varieties, very similar to the Japanese rices. For example, we have rices like Fortunato, Selenio. Yume is a Japanese rice introduced in Italy. So we cultivate also this Japanese variety, the Japanese rice. And they have very similar characteristics. So they are small, round, and crystalline, with a low content of amylose. So the grain is quite soft. It's quite sticky also. It releases starch. So the grains are quite sticky, and you can keep all the grains together, and it is a typical characteristic of the sushi.
Yes. So if we move forward to see some of the other information. So when we talk about, so here are some of the characteristics about the shape, and also some of the terminology and the use of this rice. So tell us that there is a curious story a little bit. It almost sounds like the mother of Italian risotto is actually American.
Yes, I mean, it's correct to tell that, because until the end of the 19th century, in Italy, we just have one kind of rice, and it was round, and it was called nostrale. So our popular dish was soup, and also because this rice was not so consistent, okay, and it overcooked easily. But in 1925, we started to cross rice varieties and to create new rices. And the first big and oval rice that we used to create new rices was the Lady Wright, a big and oval rice coming from California. It was created in Louisiana by a farmer that was called Salomon Lusk Wright, that created Lady Wright. Then Lady Wright arrived in California, and through California arrived in Italy. And with this rice, we started to cross Lady Wright with our round rices to get always bigger grains. And for example, one of the most famous Italian rices for risotto, that is Arborio, was created in 1946, crossing Vialone and Lady Wright. And so we started to select big grains for dry preparation, for dry dishes, like risotto. And it was, and we have to say thanks to the United States, because we imported Lady Wright from there.
Okay, so this is definitely a case of synergy. So going back to the Arborio in the 1946, what is the name of the person that we have to thank for coming up for this crossing?
For the creation of Arborio, we have to say thanks to Domenico Marchetti. Domenico Marchetti was a farmer, and he crossed Vialone and Lady Wright. And in 1946, he obtained Arborio, and he gave to this rice the name of his country, because Arborio is a small country near Vercelli, and he gave to this rice the name of his country. Okay. This makes you understand that the story of Italian rice is a familiar story, because the rices were created by farmers, by families of farmers, and through all the 20th centuries. Like for example, Carnaroli has a similar story. It was born the year before in 1945, and it was created near Milano in a country called Paolo. His father is Ettore De Vecchi, and Ettore De Vecchi was helped by Emiliano Carnaroli, that was a breeder working in L'Ente Nazionale Risi. And so at the end, when Ettore De Vecchi obtained this rice, special and fit for risotto, gave the name of Carnaroli, the surname of the person who helped him to obtain his best result.
And then also there are a couple of other varieties. So 1945 Carnaroli, 1946 we have Arborio, but then in the 60s we have also some other rices, the Roma rice, the Baldo, and there is a uniqueness about your Baldo rice, correct? Differently from all the other rices.
Yes, because Roma and Baldo are very similar, and they were created in Vercelli in the 60s. But there is a difference. Roma, well, maybe I have to say you before that usually the Italian rices have a peculiarity. They have a pearl. Yes. It is like a kind of a opalescent part inside of the grain, okay? And this opalescent part inside of the grain is porous, so it better absorbs liquids and condiments while cooking your risotto. But Baldo, that is very similar to Rome, is the only Italian rice for risotto that has a crystalline aspect. So it doesn't have the pearl inside. All the rices there are for risotto, there are Arborio, Carnaroli, Roma, Sant'Andrea, and Dialonenano. They have the pearl inside, while the Baldo, it is the only crystalline grain to prepare risotto. It's a very good rice, and it releases a good quantity of starch while cooking. So if you use, for example, Baldo or Roma or Sant'Andrea, you can obtain a naturally creamy risotto, okay? While if you use Arborio or Carnaroli, you will have a risotto al dente, so the grains are harder, but less creamy because they release a little bit less of starch.
Interesting, interesting. You mentioned the Sant'Andrea. What part of Italy is the Sant'Andrea coming from?
Sant'Andrea is coming from the northwest of Italy. It is cultivated in Piedmont and Lombardy, but I think that the best territory in which you can find Sant'Andrea perfect for risotto is called Baraggia. It is a territory between Vercelli and Biella. It is the only territory in which the rice is cultivated below the mountains. And it is a quite cold territory, and because it is near the mountains, because the lands are irrigated with water coming from Monte Rosa, from the Alpi Biellesi. I don't know how to translate this name. There are proper names of the mountains at the north of the Piedmont. And so it has the peculiarity of having a smaller grain than the other rices for risotto, but the amylose is very concentrated in this smaller grain, so the rice is harder, and it has a good firmness, and it's very, very good to have risotti al dente, but also creamy risotti, because it releases a good quantity of starch.
Wonderful. So I don't know if there is any other information about the rice specifically that you want to share before we start talking about the preparation. Whether it's the pila for the mantecatura, but also another thing that I think our audience might be interested in is to I grew up in Italy when, there were one or two brands of rice. One was usually advertised on TV by famous TV conductor, and the other one had a rooster. And but I was wondering, does rice have an expiration? Should we as consumers look at some certifications, logos, anything that would make us a better buyer of rice?
Well, in Italy we have a special law, and so it's mandatory to write on the label the rice origin, and it is the only country in Europe doing that. So we write where the rice is cultivated, and also where the rice is milled and packaged. But when we export rice, it is not mandatory in other countries, so in Europe or even in the USA, to write the rice origin. So there are some producers that voluntarily write it. So if you find the PDO or the PGI European Syrup quality, you are sure about the territory in which the rice is cultivated. For example, if you find the PDO rice of Baraggia, you are sure that it is cultivated in Italy and in the territory of Baraggia. The same for the PGI rices coming from Veneto or Emilia-Romagna. And it is a seal of the quality and also about the provenance of the product. Then another seal that some producers voluntarily introduce in their rice is Classico. Classico is another kind of guarantee of the authenticity of the Italian rice cultivation. Or they can also write it's not mandatory. So if you find in the USA this information, is because the farmer really wants to give to the consumers more information. Okay, is how can I say, a fact of transparency. Yes. Okay, so I am a farmer. I'm proud of the rice I grow, and I want to write on the label where I cultivated. So, for example, I have this example, but there could be other farmers doing that. Writes that the Carnaroli rice of this brand is cultivated, processed, and packaged in the farm of, and writing the address and the name of the producer. So, I mean, it's not mandatory for the law, but the farmer could do that to give more information. And I think that the better thing that the people could do to avoid the Italian sounding and to choose the authentic Italian rice is buy the rice produced by farmers, and so they are sure that of the provenance of this rice.
Wonderful. Now, I think by talking about this by rice, we are all starting to get a little hungry. So let's talk a little bit about preparations. Like, for instance, my husband is from Turkey. So like there is rice that is served on the side to most of the dishes that have also the rice pudding that have, I think the yogurt soup has rice. So I'm very interested in finding out a little bit about how we got to risotto. What were some previous preparations of dishes with rice?
It is a very long story, very across the centuries.
We're gonna give some milestones.
Well, the most popular dish along the centuries in Italy is probably the soup that was prepared with rice, starting from the 15th century, but also with other cereals. And that's why we had round, small grains. They were milled by artisanal miller, so the grains were often broken. And so the firmness was not the focal point of the rice, okay? It was not the added value of the rice. But as I told you before, in the 19th century, we started to select bigger grains and also to introduce industrial millers who processed the rice in a better way. So obtained the whole grain. And then the story started from the introduction through the Arabs, and then went on until the 15th, 16th century with the Spanish intervention in Lombardy, because probably the first dry preparation with rice was the paella, introduced by the Spanish during their domination in the northwest of Italy, but also again thanks to the Arabs, because they influenced the recipes with the pilaf method. That was the first rice preparation in which the rice was toasted with onion and butter, like we do with the risotto today, and also pouring the liquid inside the pot, and making the liquid absorbing all the liquid, okay? So getting at the end a dry preparation. So it was not a soup, but it was a kind of ancient risotto. And then we have to wait the 18th century to get probably one of the first risotto preparation. For example, Antonio Nebbia in Cuoco Maceratese, it was a recipe book, introduced also the mantecatura. So he prepared the soffritto, toasted the rice, cooked the rice, getting a final dry preparation, and then using at the end of the preparation butter and cheese. So this was probably the first risotto. But the name risotto was introduced for many times, for many recipes, by Pellegrino Artusi in his book that was called La scienza in cucina e l'arte di mangiar bene, Kitchen Science and the Art of Eating Well. And he was a gastronomer, and in 1891 introduced some risotto recipes in his book.
And tell us a little bit about the recipes. What were some of the ingredients in the recipes?
Yeah, well, I will tell you about risotto alla milanese, saffron risotto. He really liked this recipe and introduced in his book 3 kinds of risotto alla milanese. The first was the classic one with the saffron, and the second adding the beef marrow. So it was a little bit heavy for the stomach, probably, but it was very tasty. And a third version introducing Marsala. Marsala is a sweet wine coming from Sicily. So 3 different kinds of saffron risotto, and also called risotto alla milanese. This is called risotto alla milanese because the
a cute
first
story around it.
time
Yes.
risotto was probably prepared in 1574. The story is about Master Valerio di Fiandra. He was a master working on the dome glass windows, and he was a painter, okay, and he used saffron to create the yellow color. And I mean, the saffron was a very precious spice, and so it costed a lot even at the time. And so people took a joke of him because he used a lot of saffron to paint the glasses. And during the wedding of his daughter, one of his workers made a joke and added a pinch of saffron into his rice during the lunch. And so this was probably the first known rice with saffron, and it was born in Milano, and the story is linked to the dome building.
Okay, so a prank that turned out to establish a long tradition of risotto.
Yes, from a mistake, from a joke to an institution even.
Are there other variations that are famous out there about risotto allo zafferano? Any other names that you?
For sure, the first one we introduced a change, a famous change in risotto allo zafferano was the Gualtiero Marchesi, 3 Michelin stars collected in his life, a very famous chef in Italy, and introduced the golden leaf, so a very precious risotto allo zafferano known all over the world. And then he also made a change in the soffritto because he didn't use sauteed onion to toast the rice, but he created an acid butter with onion, white wine, and white vinegar. And he used this acid butter in mantecatura, so at the end of the risotto preparation, to give the onion and the acid taste to risotto. And another variation is the one of Davide Oldani, another Michelin star chef in Italy, near Milano. He prepared a risotto during Expo that is called riso and zafferano, rice and saffron. He cooked this rice without sauteed onion, without fats, using just water, and introducing, when the risotto was on the plate, he put he seasoned the risotto with a saffron cream. So a very, very light preparation, because we have to say that risotto sometimes is considered a heavy and fat dish because we use broth, stock, butter, Parmigiano cheese. And so he wanted to demonstrate that risotto can also be an healthy dish, an healthy recipe, cooking it with a few fats and trying to exaltate to give importance to the taste of the rice and saffron.
So Valentina, do we really have to be Michelin star chefs to create a good risotto? Can you help us out here? Can you give us some steps that we can replicate in our kitchens? And also I want to remind that Valentina holds also risotto classes online, so you can really learn from her directly. But for those of us that are just dying to get more educated, can you give us some basic steps, some recommendations?
Sure. I always say the traditional risotto wants 4 steps for the classic recipe. And we start toasting the rice. This is a fundamental step because in the hot pot, we toast the grains, because the result has to be a risotto al dente. And this step is very important because you give strength to to the grain. And you can use butter, olive oil, or even use nothing, but just putting the rice in contact with the hot pot. But it is important to toast the rice for a couple of minutes before you start to cook it. Another important step is pouring the wine, especially if you use butter or olive oil to toast the rice. In order to leave the fats, you can pour a little bit of dry white wine, and it also gives an acid taste that is important in the risotto preparation. And you have to pour a little quantity and then let the wine consume completely, because we just want to keep the acid taste, but we don't want to keep the alcohol inside of our risotto. Mm-hmm. Then we have a third step that is the cooking time, the cooking part of the risotto. Here you can use the broth that you prefer. I mean, it could be vegetable, or it could be stock with beef. It could be prepared with the fish. In Italy, we call it fumetto. It could also be only water, but the important thing is to use a liquid that is cold, hot, because we want to keep our risotto warm after the toasting first part. Mm-hmm. And then another important thing to do is mixing the risotto. So stir your risotto while you're cooking it. So add the broth ladle by ladle, not all in one time, but pour ladle by ladle, and then stir sometimes, because in this way you help the rice, you have the starch to be released by the rice, and at the end you will get a creamy risotto without adding too much butter or too much olive oil. Mm-hmm. And the last step is called the mantecatura. Mantecatura is the final step. When we turn off the stove, we wait for a couple of minutes so the temperature slow down, and then we add a piece of butter and Parmigiano Reggiano. In this way, we create a creamy risotto because it's very important for your final result. So you put the butter and you stir, and then you put in the Parmigiano, so not Parmesan, because Parmesan is an Italian sounding product, while Parmigiano Reggiano or Grana Padano are the original Italian cheese. Mm-hmm. And so you put your butter and your cheese, and then you stir. So at the end, you will get a very creamy risotto with the grain will be al dente, so you will feel under your teeth a still hard grain, but it will be mantecato in a very creamy final preparation.
Fantastic. We have a cousin from Milan, and so that was her duty. Whenever she came over, when Zia Luisa came to the house, she had to make risotto. Yeah. Risotto alla Milanese is obviously the one that we associate, but there are many different, not only other dishes that might symbolize. For instance, in Sicily, we have the arancini, depends what part of Sicily you're from, the Roman supplì. So there are many other foods, but we're still talking about the risotto. Are there any other variations? Because sometimes you see them, the purple risotto, some of the other fancier ingredients that people have used to make delicious risotto dishes.
Yeah, well, some traditionals, other risottos could be the tomato risotto, for example, or a radicchio risotto, risi from Veneto.
Yes, that's right.
Risotto with peas, or other fancy risotto, like for example with the beetroot cream, So you will get a very colored risotto, maybe with gorgonzola cheese. We use a lot of cheese in the risotto because it is tasty, and you get a very creamy and tasty risotto. Gorgonzola, toma, fontina, taleggio. So not only Parmigiano to prepare risotto. We use crustacea, so we prepare a broth that is called the bisque, using the head of the shrimps, for example. Or other. We also started to prepare vegetarian risotto, using, for example, the pumpkin cream for mantecatura instead of animal fats like butter, for example.
And this is really the time, especially here in the US, of pumpkins. So that would be definitely a variation worth trying sooner than later.
for example, I think the name is cashew anacardi. Yeah, it's like dried fruits mixed simply with water, creates a kind of vegetable butter, and it's very interesting in vegetarian risotto to create the cream without adding butter. So you can live your fantasy when you prepare risotto.
You can really, and the addition of the dry fruits just made me think of a dish, and I'm trying to remember if it did have rice. But it's called ashrei, and it's usually also called Noah's pudding. And I do remember they had a different types of grains, and then fresh and dry fruits and nuts. It might not be just rice but anyway, this has been a very interesting conversation. So Valentina, if people want to get hold of you, or if they're going to start if they want to take a class with you, what is the best way of contacting you?
Oh, well, they can go on my website. My website is ricesommelier.com, and contact me to book also personal class if they want.
That's fine. And also look at some inspiration on your Instagram account, the rice_sommelier. So Valentina, again, I wanted to thank you for your availability. Unfortunately, our time together is up. Il Big Bang ha detto stop. It's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Also, if you and your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab. You can also subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. Again, I would like to thank my guest, Valentina Masotti. Our sponsor is Istituto Mondo Italiano. And until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Thank you.